Well, welcome to our second book sandwiched in of this season. And today, John Gladstone Mills III will be reviewing a book which he co-authored along with Donald Cress Reiley III, Robert Clare Highley, and Peter Rosenberg. John is the lead attorney for the Patent Counsel Group, LLP, and formerly supervisory patent counsel for the United States Navy Naval Air Systems Command. He's a former patent examiner for the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. Dr. Mills received a doctorate in law from Georgetown University.
I got 2 doctorates, but that's okay.
When
you're collecting, it's okay. You know.
And your other doctorate is in?
Well, they're both in law.
In law.
They're boring. 2 doctorates in law. Right.
And the title of his book that he's going to be reviewing is Patent Law Basics. So welcome, John.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction. I just wanted to give an overview of the book. Oh yeah, the microphone. Surrender something. There.
Right here.
Thank you. All right. Okay, great. Thank you. This book covers a lot of topics. I think it has, I wrote down all the chapters this morning. It has 20 chapters. I'm not going to read the titles of all these chapters. But I want to go over some of the nuts and bolts and the basics of intellectual property. And just serve as a basic principle. Intellectual property is derived from our Constitution, which states, and I'll read it, in Article 8, Section 1, Clause 8, it says, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So this is a provision for, this is called the Intellectual Property Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And intellectual property became, as it developed, that just mentions writings and discoveries, but it broadened out to include patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Now, just as a jumping off point here, in law, our governing laws, we have a federal system and a state system and a local system. I just read the constitutional provision in the U.S. Constitution. So this is kind of important. These things having to do with intellectual property are provided for under federal law, except for maybe trade secrets. So I wrote down here, instead, in federal law, we have a section, a bunch of codes for various topics. So these are the codes. The code for patents is section 35 U.S.C. U.S. Code 100 and following. Trademarks is 15 U.S.C. 1051 is a bunch of sections and following. Copyright 17 U.S.C. 107 and following. And then trade secrets, these things are largely governed by what does a Trade Secret Act having to do with. There is a federal section for it, but most of it's under contract, private contract, and state law will contribute. Contracts are generally good for state law, state laws. Okay, so now, the big zone, just to try to divide this up into manageable pieces, there are 3 things you want to think of in terms of this type of property. The first of these is how to get the property, how to obtain the property. Second is how to use the property. And that has sort of 2 components. Licensing the property once you have obtained it, or if someone's infringing your property, which you might regard as a trespass to your land, if you own land, an action in trespass, but in property, intellectual property, it's called an action in infringement. And these things are provided for in these federal codes for each of these areas of intellectual property. Those actions, if it's infringement, a complaint for infringement, are brought in the U.S. District Court at the first level. So let's say you're here in Elmira, you've got to find the U.S. District Court, probably it's in Buffalo, for the Eastern District of the state, New York State. And then it's appeal, the appellate level of that would go to something called the Court of Appeals, CAFC, the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in Washington. Okay. So, returning to those three areas, the obtaining and the using of the grant, the using of the thing, I want to talk a little bit about the obtaining part, how to get the patent for an invention. And I'm going to give you some examples after I go through this overview of, some actual examples of patents and the obtaining part, and then the enforcement part. So, primarily there are, a number of subsections of the patent code. The first of these is 101. That has to do with what is patentable. In other words, you might come up with something, it could be a great idea, but they don't provide for that in the statute, i.e., an equation or a law of nature. Somebody didn't find this law of nature before. You come upon it and say, I just discovered gravity. Well, you can't get a patent to gravity, unfortunately. Okay, 101 is what's patentable. 102 and 103, they are to do with what people did before. 102 is what's called novelty. Is your thing new, different, unusual, unlike anything else? That is novelty. Under 102. 103 is more difficult. That's what's obvious. Would it be obvious to make your invention based on what was done before? An example would be, let's say you have a pen, a writing instrument, and you attach to this pen an eraser. Well, would it be obvious to add an eraser to a pen? Probably would be. The erasers were known, pens were known. The combination of these two is probably not, doesn't rise to the level of being unobvious. People would think of that. Finally, 112. 112 is about how you disclose your invention. Is it clear? Is it understandable to ordinary people? Not just to scientists. It has to be clear enough so that, let's put it this way, so the jury looking at this thing can figure out, what is this? That's very important. Somebody has to translate the technical language, whether it's genetic, chemical, mechanical, whatever, nuclear, into terms that ordinary people can understand. So 112 is directed to that. Now, just to give you the process here, these things about obtaining a patent under these grounds here that we just went over, you would file an application for your invention, and it would have components. So there's sections, and you have to follow these. The government makes you follow. All the patents look the same. Okay, you look at any patent, and it's got the same sections. The sections are background of the invention, summary of the invention, summary of the drawings, description of the preferred embodiment, and then, of course, the drawings, and the abstract, and then finally a set of claims. The claims define your invention. No matter what went before in the description, it's the claims that count the most. They can refer back. But if you're missing something in the claims, just because you have that in the description, doesn't mean that you can file a complaint or get a license on that thing, whatever is in the description, if it's not in the claims. The claims are critically important. And that's what patent attorneys spend most of their lives writing is claims. Okay. So this process of getting the patent has to do with an exchange, a back and a forth that we call prosecution, between the patent applicant and his attorney and the patent office, which has examiners. I was an examiner, as was mentioned, for many years. And, you show up to work in the morning, you open a bunch of files, you got started going through all those portions I just described to you, the background, the summary, the preferred embodiments, the claims. Then you look at each one of these things, 101, 102, 103, 112, and writing objections and or rejections to that application, unless it meets all of these features. And there's a couple more utility. If it meets all those, it's good to go. The examiner stamps it out, and we get a patent with a number, a unique number that identifies your patent right, and you can market it, etc. Most often, the examiner finds something wrong. Sorry, that's the way life is, and writes what's called a rejection in an office action, sends it out to you for correction. It's up to you then to respond within, in a certain time frame. Yeah, we got to fix this if we want to still get our patent. So there's this back and forth that we call prosecution. It can go on for a while. So you fix it, you think to the best of your ability, you send it back, they look at it and they say, it's sort of fixed, but not quite what we wanted, and they send it back to you for more fixing, and it goes back and forth like that. So finally you reach a point where it's either fixable or not, and then you can appeal it, etc. That's a whole other topic area, which I'm not going to cover today. But that's the rudiments of getting the patent. Now, these other things, trademarks is somewhat similar. These things I just described to you have to do with prior inventions. The test in trademarks is largely, is your mark confusingly similar or generic? These are topics of rejection in trademarks or approval in trademarks. There's a bunch of these things. The examination is not quite so rigorous as in patents, because a trademark is simply a designation like the word Exxon or Sunoco, a name that signifies a product in the marketplace, identification of a product used in commerce. Copyrights has a similar situation, only it's not much of an examination. It's more of a registration. You develop some writing and, photography, etc., etc. You just apply and they grant you a copyright if you a registration of copyright. Trade secrets is a matter of, to get that, you've got to keep whatever your invention is secret. And you have to take deliberate steps to make sure that you are not exposing your invention to the public. And they're constantly looking for examples of people that leaked information they weren't supposed to, and if the diligence on the owner to shut that down. Right, so these are the things about obtaining. Okay, back over, now we're going to go to the use of the thing. Here you are. I think maybe what I'll do now is I'll go into some examples. We'll get rid of all this, and I'm going to give you some examples of actual, things I thought of that sort of illustrate an inventive process. So here you are. You have a big family, let's say, pretend there are a lot of people in your household that have computers. Everybody's got their platform, whether it's Apple or IBM, or it's PC, whatever. But each of these platforms have limited memory. Right? So, a lot of people need a lot of memory for videos, etc., right? So you get this idea. You got persons 1, 2, 3, 4, and each one of these has memory, right? These computers. But it's not sufficient. So you get the idea, well, I'm going to get a lot of memory for all of these guys, all these people to access. Let's say 1,000 terabytes, or 10,000 terabytes, something really big. That'll be large. So, by the way, that's not going to be solid state. That's going to be what they used to call platters. You could have solid state, it would be very expensive. We're trying to save money here. So you get this memory block, and now the thing is, you've got to allocate each one of these people who's going to try and get into this thing. They're all going to be using this memory, somewhat simultaneously. So something has to allocate memory space to each of these computers and sort of prioritize their spacing and organize that memory. So there's a bunch of circuitry for doing this with microprocessors, et cetera, to do this thing with algorithms, et cetera. Now, the back end, this is accessing memory, right? And at the back end, we got to store into the computer's components. What do they come up with? There's going to be two processing functions here, this one and this one. And one big memory block. So this is, you're looking at, nobody else in your neighborhood has this. You think, hey, why don't I get a patent on this? So you get some help, you write this thing up, something like, we claim an system for accessing memory amongst multiple users, and then you'll have elements. First element is switching system. Well, first you're going to name all these people, a number of users, then you have the switching system, controlled by a microprocessor for allocating space to the memory, right? According to various criteria. Then you have a second thing. You have a second microprocessor for delivering access to space back to users. Okay, so you write this up. You got the first thing, the second thing, you got the main memory, you got the whole system for communication on an internet, type of communication system, and you think you're good, and you find something, you get the patent, you do all that exchange with the patent office, they grant you a patent, and you're very happy, and you take this out and you take it to some friends and show, hey, look, this is what I got. I want to build some of these things and sell them in, let's say, some, microprocessor, some computer store. So that you do all that. And then somebody calls you and they say, geez, I saw you got this thing called, home system for memory access. And I was over at some other store and I saw something inside of it. And now I get to this. It looks like your thing, but it costs like $50 less per unit. So you get their contact information, and they say, well, we got a patent too. I said, really? They say, yeah. So you look up their patent. Their patent has all of this stuff, like this, but it's missing this down here. This part down here, they don't do in hardware, they do in software. So, you say, well, we'll sue them. But your patent is more specific than theirs. You're not going to win that case. You've claimed this thing and this thing. They can do it without this thing. They're not infringing your patent.
So then you can't tell them to stop.
You can't tell them to stop. Now I got a worst case.
What is it?
I got a worst case. Well, this is the same thing situation. I just made this up this morning. This may not be perfect, okay? But same type of situation. Only they are copying your thing exactly. Same thing. All this up here, the second thing down there, everything identical. Only the packaging is different. So you write a cease and desist letter, or your attorney does, and they come back and they say, yeah. I've had a number of cases like this. They say, yeah, we copied it. Yeah, we did it. We copied everything you did. In fact, we didn't change anything. You're thinking using some improvements. We're going to put those on later. But for our first go around, we copied it exactly. And you're saying, well, we can't do that. We got a patent. He said, we don't care. The reason we don't care is your patent's not valid. He said, how can it not be valid? The patent office granted it to me. It met all those criteria, 101, 102, 103, 112, and utility. They said, yeah. Said, there's only one problem. Under 102 and 103, the examiner didn't find all the relevant prior art, prior inventions. And we got a list of those. So why don't you just sue us and we'll see what happens. In the meantime, they're racking up profits left and right. You're losing money left and right. So you bring this lawsuit, and it's up to a judge or a jury to decide whether that prior invention that they're talking about would have invalidated your patent if the government had known about it. And many times that happens. So there's business invalidity. You know, one part of the whole thing is infringement. Is it the same? Are we doing something different? But another part is that document valid? And there's a bad thing here I forgot to mention. Let's say,
Sounds pretty bad to me.
remember those things I was telling you about? 102, 103, 112, and 101? Any one of those is a basis for invalidity. So you're thinking, hey, yeah, maybe my thing's not valid under 103, but I'm good on everything else. So I should be good. In this world, if it's invalid on any of them, and not just, let's say, one claim, you have 20 claims, 19 are good, but one is bad, the whole thing is invalid. Sorry. So these claims are very important. And the effort that goes in, and people say, well, it's so expensive to get these crazy patents. Well, yeah, because our brain power has to come into how to structure these things. And by the way, if you think this, talk about, you've heard of CRISPR, right? CRISPR, the genetic coding, et cetera, and cutting genetic code. Big patent war over this thing. And the woman who's getting a Nobel Prize for this, her patent's been declared invalid. Yeah. In England, or UK, not here in the US. But I'm just telling you, even the big brains can make a mistake with these things. Just so you know. So that's an example. Now, I was going to do something else. Oh, yes. I don't know how much time we have, but I want to do an international thing here. A little quick change of that. Let's say you come up with this invention, and you do some research online, and you find out that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is kind of slow about reviewing your patent, or patents generally. There's a pandemic, and the federal workforce hasn't come back to work, and everybody's working from home, nobody's checking anything. It sounds crazy, but you want to call IRS sometimes. If you're going to snag up with IRS, call IRS, and back on you hear the dog barking, and you think, the lady says, just a minute, I gotta make lunch, I'm gonna put it in the microwave, I'll get right back to you. You think I'm joking. And so you're thinking, I'm on hold here, my time is precious, apparently she doesn't. And then you say to the person, federal employee, you say, geez, I'm kind of in a rush here, could you kind of speed up your lunch? And they say, they say, well, no. And I said, why aren't you supposed to go back to work someday? No. I said, you're not going back to work ever? No. I said, why? She said, we're so important, they can't tell us what to do. Okay, so we'll be working from home forever until I retire. Okay, so you get that kind of message, pretend, from the U.S. government in various agencies, including the Patent and Trademark Office. And I just researched this morning. They are behind right now, by the record in their history, they got a 200-year history, they're further behind right now than they've ever been in their whole history. That's not good. That's a losing team every season for a century. Okay, that's just not good. So you're thinking, I've got this invention. I want to get protection sometime in my lifetime. I want somebody to look at this. Enter international patents. There's 5 big international patent countries. The you call it the EU, European Union Patent Operation, which includes a number of European countries. Then you have Korea, you have Japan, you have China, and of course you have the US. These are they're called the top 5. IP5 is what they're called. So you research these, I just did it this morning, and you find out, lo and behold, that Korea only has about 100,000 patents pending. And you can call Korea, I've done it, and say, hey, and they even have local offices in Virginia. Korea has local offices right in Virginia. You can call them local. They say, hey, I'm thinking of filing a patent. Oh, great. You don't hear the dog barking, none of that stuff. And they say, and you say, well, what's the fees? And they give you the fees, and they give you the rundown. It's how soon can this be examined? I don't know, maybe next week. Wow. Things are happening. So, now let's go through this little scenario here. So here you have Korea, right? And here you have USA, right? So here you have applicant USA, right? Files application in Korea, okay? And is granted a patent. A Korean patent has no validity in the United States of America. Okay. Comparably, USA patent has no validity in Korea. 0 means nothing. Okay? So how do we handle this? Okay, you get your Korean patent, and you start to do manufacturing in Korea. Right? You're making product out here. And at some point you say, hey, I'd like to bring this product into the USA, but I don't have a patent. The way to handle that is, you have this Korean patent, right? But up here you have a trade secret thing. So part of this technology, you make a trade secret. So that when it comes into the USA, you want to sue somebody to enforce it, you use your trade secret right, which they don't grant. So you have a bifurcated system. Part is patent, part is trade secret. By the way, Steve Jobs, no idiot. What he did was, for the trade secret component of these Apple computers, he glued them. There's no way into there without breaking the thing. You want to break it? Go ahead. Try to find that trade secret. So this has been done before. How are we doing on time?
Good, about 25 more minutes.
25 more minutes, okay.
Can you write a patent that quick?
Yeah. I'd like to tell you a little story about a U.S. government, a Navy patent, if you have a minute, we can go into that. The U.S. Navy, this is all public record, part of this was once secret, but it's no longer secret. It's kind of fascinating. It has to do with secret patents. There are secret patents, okay, they have to do with secret technologies, which I was involved with a lot. When, this is kind of down in the weeds a little bit, but I'll do the big picture thing first. A company called Honeywell, first of all, the technology. When you're flying jet aircraft or any aircraft and landing on a carrier, well, let's just do a runway, okay? You know when you take off, there's lights on that runway, and they're looking down the lights, and they're clearing the plane for the landing on, runway XKY, and you'll see those lights even if you're in the cabin. You see the lights, you see the plane coming down. Okay, now, cockpits in aircraft of jet planes have a lot of different. There's a lot of controls because it's more than a passenger plane. They got armament on there. They got radar. They got all kinds of communication with all kinds of things. It's a much more complex console, very. And as a result, they decided, well, it's too confusing. I mean, people have to make decisions in very small second time frames. Trust me, if you ever go to one of these simulators and try to fly a jet onto an aircraft carrier, you learn how fast you got to do things to make that thing land right without crashing. Anyway, so they decided to put various things in color, so the pilots could easily look to an area and they'd see certain colors and they'd know what that was. Things were color coded for them, so they could take a quick glance and get the colors. Problems arose because on the runways there were comparable colors, and they couldn't change the colors on the runways, but they could modify the colors in the cockpit. Now, some of these colors, the human eye, can't adjust to that quickly. For example, the big issue in this case was orange and red. What was red and what was orange? And how many seconds would it take a pilot, to distinguish between a red and an orange on the console, in the helmet, and on the runway, or in this case, the aircraft carrier? So, Honeywell came up with an invention to take care of this problem, and had specialized console configurations with various wavelengths of colors of orange, and echoed in the helmet. So the helmets also have indicators of what's on the console. So the person who's looking there, they can be looking through their helmet and see what's in the console without looking down to the console. Okay, Honeywell developed this, and they told the U.S. Navy about it about 30 years ago, something like that. The Navy thought they wanted to. Honeywell said, "Hey, we got the patent. Why don't you negotiate with us for a license?" As I just read earlier. For whatever reason, the Navy said, "We don't want to do that. It's too expensive. We don't want to pay all that money. It was, significant." So the Navy said, amongst themselves, two things happened. I'll give you the first one. They said, "Let's just use it. We'll just copy it. We'll take it. We'll use it. Let them sue us. We're the Navy." Okay. So they started, now get this, they just didn't use it in Navy aircraft. They used it in Army, Marine Corps, helicopters. Every single aircraft the U.S. government had this technology in it. So you have to start multiplying the number of aircraft times the cost of each one of those over the time period of 30 years. The number came up to it's around $8 billion. And it became the most expensive patent suit in history. Anyway, so the Navy, when it got to trial, they said, essentially, we copied this. In other words, they didn't even contest the infringement. But what we're saying is that your patent is invalid because of prior art. So there's another a couple of complications here. They're highly technical. Remember I told you this thing called 112. I mentioned 112 had to do with the disclosure, right? Well, when they do litigation, the patents, they go back to the record of the patent office of all the documents. And in this record, under 112, 35 U.S.C. 112, they found there was a defect that the examiner had found that made the claims not valid when they were filed, originally 30 years ago. So,
a defect in the invention?
The way
Or
it
a
was,
defect
the way it was
in the-
written. Not the technology, the write-up of the technology
Okay,
was
I got
defective.
it, I got it.
So Honeywell didn't want to tell everybody about this. What they did was they canceled their application. Patent application canceled. And resubmitted it as a new one. New. They substituted this for this. But when they did this, this destroyed part of this. So this thing was also invalid against the original filing, meaning that they had cut down, they created it on their own, they created invalidity, an unforced error. There are ways to correct this, but this is not the way, okay? Result, Navy was found not to infringe an invalid patent. But just to settle it, we didn't, I think we paid like $150 million. But that's a lot cheaper than $8 billion. Okay, so there's an example of things that can happen in technology. I got another story. There was this lady who was a computer programmer for IBM. That was her day job. This kind of older story. But anyway, her day job was a computer programmer for IBM. But at night, she moonlighted in a hair salon. So she came up with this invention that was like a hair, there's devices they use in hair. It was a kind of a wraparound thing. You could reshape your hair, different angles, etc. I mean, honestly, I didn't see this patent. I've been told about it. Anyway, so her salon marketed this thing, and she got a patent for it, and they marketed it, and it spread out through Florida, and people were buying this left and right, and she made about $10 million. Well, subsequently, she tried to sue somebody because it was easy to copy, for copying her thing, and they did the same thing. They said, hey, yeah, it was so easy, it was obvious it was the same thing. Or not, clearly, carbon copy. So they couldn't say we didn't infringe it. You infringed it. But your thing is invalid for a whole bunch of reasons. 112, 102, 103, you do it. And it was declared invalid. But she kept the $10 million. And so, in other words, you can have an instrument that's invalid, but if you've been making money on it, even though it's invalid all that time, you don't have to return the money, even if it was invalid from the beginning. So that's another wrinkle. There's a lot of angles to this stuff. Trust me, it goes on and on.
So she had the patent, it was approved of.
Yes. And based on that approval, she went and got loans to set up manufacturing and everything else. They manufactured thousands of these things, sold them in all these salons across Florida. And then she would have been okay if she stopped there. But she saw somebody copying her. She says, I'm going to stop those suckers from copying my thing. And when she did that, then after that, they could sell it. She could sell it. But she couldn't claim an exclusive right.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can
I hope this is somewhat interesting. I mean, feel free to ask questions.
can a patent outlast? Is it valid? Does it have a limited life?
Yeah, 20 years.
20 years.
20 years from the date of filing. Now, it used to be 17 years from the date of invention. So, yes, because they didn't establish invention until the patent office had ruled on it.
Can they extend it?
Well, no. I mean, the way people extend patents, this is not permitted, really. But if you're an applicant and you want to extend your patent, you do what's called a continuation. How does that work? Here's your patent application, right? This document. And it's granted a patent. So here we have our patent, right? And then you like this thing, you're making money on it, so you say, well, this thing's got a limited life, 20 years from the day we filed, right? So we've got during the course of the life of this, during the course of the life of this thing, you file what's called a continuation. And that continuation will conceivably, let's say if this thing is pending for right now, 7 years, 10 years, something like that. So toward the end of that period, you file another one. But it's not the same. There's several types of continuations. There's a continuation part, it's called a straight continuation, there's divisional, there's a bunch of different categories. So you gotta pick the right category. And then it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different from this. But the question is, how different? And some people say, hey, it's almost the same thing. I get more time. Now, people don't like this. Okay, it's called unlawful extension. It exists, but it's sort of gaming the system.
In that same case, growing up, you look at a lot of things. You look at the tag under a mattress, and you're under there. They're like, do not tear this off. You say, oh my God, I'm going to jail. I've torn off that mattress, right? But this one says patent penned.
Okay.
And I said, well, I wonder what that penned is all about.
All right, let me explain what that's about. Once somebody applies for the application, it's pending until it's granted, right? So in this period here, it's pending, right? Now, somebody over here comes along and is making the same thing. Party Y, or X, is going to make this same thing. Now, we don't know if this is going to be granted or not. If it's granted, this party who gets the grant can sue them for the time frame that they put that patent pending words on that thing until from the time they put the patent pending on, essentially, indefinitely until they can stop these people from making it. So these people are going to have to, that patent pending protects this patent owner so he can bring back an action later against somebody that's possibly infringing it.
So it's protected while it's pending.
I hope I said that right.
While it's pending, it's protected.
It's a protection thing, yeah. You can do it with trademarks too. With trademarks, when you file a trademark, let's say you file a trademark. Right on the box, as soon as you file it, you put TM on it. Right? That essentially says it's pending. Okay? Because when it's granted, you put an R with a circle around it. That's a registered trademark.
Registered.
Yes. That's like a patent grant. It's registration of the mark. Let's see here. Let me refer to, now I'm going to go into a new topic. I don't know how much confusion this could cause.
You don't have to carry that
Well,
microphone.
let me just, there's a new thing I'm going to talk about.
The amplification is pending.
There's a new thing I'm going to talk about here.
Somebody,
I can't not talk about this. If I didn't talk about this, this would not be you would be shortchanged here. Okay, now look. Let's say you have this great patent, like that one to that memory system, right? And you found out that Facebook or Apple, or one of the big biggies, is infringing your patent to this memory access, centralized memory access system. So you filed a complaint in your district court, for infringement. And it's sent over, and you send it to Apple, let's say it's Apple. They look at this, and they have two things they can do. Actually, they have to sort of develop it. Within so many days, they have to file a response to your claim for infringement, response. And really this answer. Anyway, they have to file that. But another thing they can do is they can say, we're also going to file a request for inter-parties examination, an RCE, IPR, inter-parties, IPR, inter-parties re-examination. This thing, let's think about this. The first thing you file in the U.S. District Court. This is the U.S. District Court, right? You're in a court system here, right? These guys are going to answer that. I'm going to answer. And they're going to file against you, okay, an IPR. So here's the way this looks. I didn't do a very good job. Okay, let's do this. Sorry. Let's do this the right way. Okay. So here's your patent. You're filing an action against Apple, or let's say Facebook. Okay. You're filing this complaint against them. Right? They have to answer this thing in the U.S. District Court. But they, Facebook, can start a new action against you at the patent office. And this is an agency thing. This is a court thing, and this is USPTO, federal agency. So, what happens next? Facebook says, don't do anything in this court case until the USPTO looks at this whole situation. So this thing is stopped. The first thing, the court action is stopped while we're doing this administrative review, which is called an IPR. Inter-parties review. Now,
But it takes years.
no, this is supposed to be faster. They have a time limit with this. So they got to do it within a year, the whole thing. It's kind of pricey, to me, about $50,000 for the file this thing. But it can snag up everything for you who owns the patent when they do this. Now, they can only file this IPR based on prior art. They can't use, it's not patentable because it's subject matter, they can't use 112, they can't use all those other things. They can only use prior art, 102 and 103. Those are the prior art things. But the reason I'm bringing this up is this is a very big deal in the media, this IPR stuff. You see, if you see patent stuff, it's always referred to, oh, so-and-so got sued, but they filed an IPR. It's going to be resolved sooner than we thought. And usually, the patent is declared invalid. So this is a very sad situation. The patent office granted the patent, right? You wouldn't think they'd be invalidating their own patent, would you? Huh?
Yeah.
No, it's their same personnel that did it.
That's right.
These guys are saying to another division of the patent office, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You should never grant it in the first place. That's it's not a happy situation. Okay, yes.
Sometimes I read about or I hear about a multinational corporation, and there are individuals who work there who have multiple patents.
Yeah.
How does that happen if the time to get a patent is so backlogged that it takes years and years?
Okay, very good question. There's a special procedure to speed things up. What I've been describing to you is everything in the ordinary course of business.
Okay.
If you're in a big rush, you can ask for express treatment, which they move you to the front of the line.
Oh.
But that is expensive. And
That's
another
why
problem with that express treatment is, let's say your client, or you're the inventor, suddenly has a change, they get some idea and they say, oh geez, I want to modify this, and that's not quite right, and we should have done this, and we should have done that. But if you're in the slow track, you can fix that. If you're in the fast track, there's no time for fixing anything. If it's screwed up, it's screwed up. Now you can refile it, spend another $100,000 more, but you know, it gets expensive. But that's how they do it. If you want to stack the patents and you get a lot of money, you can do this sort of thing. Now, some of those patents in these multinational corporations come from other countries, and not all U.S. So these systems are different, and the granting process is different. For example, in Europe, in the United States, we have limitations on genetic stuff, and I don't want to go into detail, but there's limitations. On computer technology, there's limitations. The EU doesn't have those notions. They think that's crazy. They think, why not give them a patent? Let them sort it out in court. Who cares? We're making money here. See what I'm saying? So they give out patents. We're blocking these patents. In fact, there's been a whole article about we're backward because we're blocking stuff that people are getting protection for over in the EU and Japan and Korea. They're our competitors, for God's sake. People are taking their technologies over there. Why waste time in the United States of America when you can go over there and get the thing quickly in many cases, if you know how to do it? So that's a problem. That's a big problem. And we haven't fixed it. It's because the Congress has to fix that. The Congress has to fix it. And the Congress is kind of divided on a lot of things. I don't want the details. So things like this are kind of low on the priority list.
How old is this whole system of patent?
George Washington got the first patent.
George Washington, and then
You got number
Thomas
one.
Jefferson was the
For
second.
making teeth?
No. George Washington's patent has to do with ash from a fireplace. It could be used as fertilizer. It's more like, could say it's a one-page document.
But is it for
Hand
Britain
scripted.
or here?
It's scripted. It's in hand script. He may have scripted it himself. I don't know. It's a beautiful document.
And then
One-page thing.
And then Thomas Jefferson was the second one, I believe.
Thomas Jefferson was the first patent examiner.
Oh, I see.
And he ran the whole patent office by himself.
Oh.
Okay? He got overloaded. It was just impossible. Because he was into inventions from Europe. He had all kinds of ships and stuff in it and this and that. This guy was into all kinds of technology at the time.
Right.
So then they got the idea, hey, one guy can't do all this. We're going to hire a bunch of people. But it started slow. You know.
So before that, they were using a European patent before that?
Well, we didn't have a highly developed judicial system. Remember, we were sort of this is the nascent phase of the nation. So I don't know if you could say before that. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, well, the patent system goes back, you know, they had it in Florence, I think. I forget what the first one, but it had to do with, I can't remember now what the very first one, but it dates back centuries. Sorry, I wish I researched that.
And now it's on the internet. You can get into the patent office and
Right. By the way, you can, this patent number 1, just type in George Washington and it'll come with a nice picture of it and everything else. It's pretty impressive, actually.
It was a trivia question, and I looked it up, and oh, George Washington, wow.
Yeah, so that, you know, there's a lot of people that say, why don't we just get rid of all of this? It's a big headache. These guys running around, talking about infringement, shutting down industries, and this, that, and the other thing. Why don't we just axe it?
Why not?
Well, it's not easy to axe, because it's in the Constitution. And to axe that, take the provision, take the requirements that you have to do to change the Constitution, which are kind of a high bar. And besides, there's a lot of people that like it the way it is. Just like the tax system. Why don't we change the taxes? Well, make it as simplified, like, you know, like here, you know, it's straight up easy, right? You know, all these crazy deductions and everything else, credits and on and on and on. You know, everybody knows that does taxes, how complicated. It's unbelievable. Tax code would fill a whole room here practically. But there's a lot of people that like it that way. See what I'm saying? Enough so that they're not changing it anytime soon. Seems so. They keep talking about it. As you know. All right, I know, am I out of time here or what? I'm out of time.
You're right on target.
Okay, any other questions? Any questions? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna file copyright for cartoon strips for newspapers. And 20 years ago, you could mail an application.
Yeah, that's right.
Now you have to do it all online.
Right. That's true of trademarks too. Nothing can be done in trademarks except online.
So I want to do it online instead of doing, instead of 10 samples. I was just wondering, is the cartoon protected or the characters in the cartoon protected?
Okay, you got multiple protections. You got the characters, you got the script of the cartoon, and maybe the overall look of it. You got three things going on.
It's all protected.
You got to do registration on each one of those three.
Oh,
They're isolated. The right is specific for each one.
even for the trademarks.
No, that's different. Trademarks, you asked for copyrights, right?
Right.
Now, the trademark has to do with a name of something that's used in commerce. So if you say squiggly is your cartoon, squiggly is trademarkable because that's the generic name of a cartoon in commerce, right?
So the name of the cartoon.
Yeah, that's a trademarkable
The
thing.
trademark.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anybody does genealogy, that is one place where you might want to go and put in names. I did it, and to my great surprise, my brother was an inventor, which I had never known. He worked for IBM. IBM had the patent, but they listed him as the inventor.
Oh, yeah.
Her father has patents for Westinghouse.
Well, these patents are sort of like there's a part of it that's commercial and helps in all kinds of investment and what we call financial wealth generation. But there's another part that's sort of like biographical and historical and it takes on a different aura after that patent is expired. And some of these patents, by the way, patent models in the old days, in the prior time, maybe 1940s or something, for a long time, they had patent models. So you had to make a little model of an invention and send it to Washington, and they had these things stored in buildings down there. Okay? And eventually they moved the whole collection up to the Hudson River. But if somebody ever says to you, I'll tell you a personal story of this, you know, I got this thing in my garage. We don't know what it is. It's got this little number on it. It's got a couple wagon wheels and this and that. It's patent. Drive over there immediately. Get that thing. Those are worth a fortune because they're one of a kind. And I had this situation. My mom was cleaning a house on the Hudson River. Somebody died and the family was involved in his death and the estate and everything else. The house had to be cleaned up. You know how it goes. And suddenly the ceiling in the closet collapsed on top of all this dust came down on top of her, like, stuck or whatever. And this junk came down in a box, and there was a patent model and all the correspondence with the patent. This is crazy. So she calls me up. She says, I don't know what to do with this thing. You're supposed to know something about patents. What do you want me to do with it? So at that time, I didn't realize how important this was. I don't know why, but I said, well, just put it on the porch. I'll get to it, Mom. You know how it is. We'll get to it with the badminton rackets and the other junk we had someday. So it sat outside on the screen porch for at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. And then my parents were going to move from that house, and my mom calls me and says, we came across this box. It's been out in the back porch in the snow for all this time and stuff. It's this patent thing. If you don't want it, I'm going to throw it out. So I said, well, I don't know. I'll take it. I'll take it. So you better get up here and get it in your next trip. Thanksgiving. So I got up there and I got this box and this and that. It was from the 1820s or something. And I didn't know how old it was. Or I didn't know anything about it. So I got all this historical stuff, took it back to Washington. Somebody told me, I was in the patent office at the time, I was calling around. I said, does anybody here know anything about these patent models? They said, yeah, there's this guy named Jim Daly. He knows a lot about those things. Why don't you call the guy up? And he was an examiner also. I described the scene. He said, listen, mister. He said, can you bring that into the office tomorrow? I said, sure. He said, can you bring that to your office and I'll have $20,000 cash to take that off your hands.
Oh.
I said, I said, I didn't know what to say. I said, well, thank you. And I didn't, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
But very
I mean,
wise.
More. How much was it actually worth?
I'm sorry, what?
How much was it actually worth?
I don't know, but I still have it.
I'll give you,
Inflation.
I know it's worth more than it was when he did. And let me just tell you, that was a double patent. Because that patent was a patent inside a patent. It was a patent for this device, as well as a cart, and a patent for a brake inside the device. So it was a double patent.
That could be worth $100,000.
Well, it's not worth that much.
tell
But,
us,
but it's,
later on
these things are worth money.
Yeah.
I can tell you that right now. Especially the more complicated. You know, if it's like a steam engine.
Yes.
So they put a little piece of straw in there to fire the thing up, get some steam going. I mean, that, you know, you can imagine that they had to make these things work. I don't know if we had a couple. One more story. This is comical. So they had this thing, the requirement for patent models, right? So this woman shows, you know, there's a lot of patents are like wide open to the whole population. So this lady has what she calls it as a Batmobile. She's invented a Batmobile, which Batmobiles are sort of known for Batman. So the examiner says, look, we don't know left and right in your Batmobile. Why don't you bring it over to the patent office? So she drives this car, which is a so-called Batmobile, over to the patent office and parks it right in front of the patent office. And it's got wings on it and all kinds of gear and plastic and this and that and everything. And it sat there for like 3 or 4 days. We didn't know what she didn't get a patent, but it became kind of an eyesore for everybody. And we were told, don't ever ask any more for patent models. It's just not working out right. I got one more for you. So some examiner was handling a patent application, and this person really wanted their patent. They really wanted their patent. So and you can do this. They said, I want to come down to Washington and explain this thing to you. If somebody says they're going to do that, you have to say, okay. You're not allowed to say, no, you can't come. So they show up, and they got a backpack and a sleeping bag, and they said, listen, I'm going to stay in your office right here until you grant me that patent. I'm going to sleep right here. I'm good. You got a laboratory. I got my little cooking thing here, and I'm not moving till you get this patent. So the person slept there, I don't know, maybe a week or something. And finally somebody said, listen, you know, we'll take it in due course and we'll give you the best review we can, and please, we'll get you a hotel room nearby. Something like that. Anything to get that person. A little humor from that. There's a lot of funny stories, but anyway. All right, so that's it for today. Another question.
When you file a patent, you have to say wait a year till they validate it. Did you say it was protected during that year that they're processing?
Pending, if you put pending on that, it's protected. But it's going to be more than a year. Yes, sir. Yeah, I just looked up this morning, they're 27 months behind, or 28 months behind for looking at it for the first time. You got to add that's over 2 years. Then you got to add 2 more years for them to review it. We're approaching 5 to 6 years. Suddenly Korea is looking kind of attractive. Sorry. Hope that was.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I hope I didn't say anything